What's going on, guys? This is Uche Njoku, Sneaker Principal. And today I was privileged to have attended an event put together by the New York City Public Schools under the leadership of Chancellor David Banks on his last day. And this event was an opportunity to hear from panelists through the AI Advisory Council. Not something that I would have ever imagined to have attended and participated in my career. The whole notion of artificial intelligence is not something that just ever came up anywhere in my training as an educator, as a teacher, as a school leader, or even now as I explore the possibilities of advancing my career to levels beyond the school building. But it is here. If we had doubts about it, there are doubts no more. At least for the past 3 to 4 years, we know that generative model AI has been a thing, ChatGPT, then all the others that existed before it or alongside it and even after. The ability to type a prompt into your computer and get a response. In the early days, you'd be like, okay, this is pretty cool. Sometimes it would give you things that made no sense whatsoever. But today has gotten much better. But not only that, it's something that we know that we're all using in some capacity, if not publicly, in a lot of cases secretly. The idea that our computers, the algorithms that run it, are now able to respond to us in a very human-like nature is something that we cannot ignore anymore. So to have the largest school system in the country actually have an event that said, let's talk about this. Let's talk about what we know. Let's talk about how this is impacting us now, how this is impacting us into the future. Everyone from members of school building communities, the key stakeholders, students, teachers, leadership, support staff, parents, the extended community. The fact that we had the opportunity today to have this conversation was quite amazing. And I have to give much kudos to Chancellor Banks for his leadership and his just wherewithal to know this is something we cannot ignore. And to have this be the final major event of his leadership is incredible. But enough with that. I want to share with you some highlights, some of the things that I got out of it, and even some of the things that I felt in the process. There was definitely a sense of excitement in the air. The fact that I walked into a space, I saw leadership, not just central level leadership, but also district level leadership, as well as school leadership, and then leadership that represent parents as well, all in the same room. And some of the things, and in no particular order, because I'm gonna be honest with you, when I take notes, I pull the things that make me go, what does this mean in the greater scheme of things? So please forgive me. I am not the best at rerunning what people are saying in a line by line structure. My head kind of jumps over the place. So I'll share with you some of the notes that I took and what it meant to me. So one of the questions that was put out there was how to have intelligent conversations with the agent. And I thought, agent, which is the platforms, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's AI through Perplexity, or whatever platform, how to have intelligent conversations. And what this connects to is, how do you prompt it? One of the things that I have learned in the process of working with ChatGPT and other, similar platforms is the fact that what you ask it is very important. The way you phrase your questions, and not only that, how often you use it so it can learn from your style of questioning, and where you also realize if I ask it this way, it's going to give me this answer, versus if I want to ask this way, it gives me an answer that's more aligned to what I'm asking it, and it's more correct to what is factual. So it was made over and over very clear that we have to get better at learning how to prompt it. And some of you have heard prompt engineering. How do you build questions or tasks that result as close as possible to the outcomes that are expected from that task, from that question? So that's something that came up. And then the other thing was being conscious of having AI generative chatbots as partners in all tasks. So one of the things I heard from folks who were talking that I took away was that we have to start using it more. We have to, of course, responsibly, making sure that even our students know how to use it responsibly, not relying on all the information that comes out of it. And that was a big concern. When you use AI and you ask it a question and it gives you a response, being careful in knowing that that answer might not be the right answer, or it might be an answer that's skewed, depending on how the algorithm has been trained to respond to such a question. So there's something that came up. There was a member of MIT faculty that stated that, that there were concerns around that, and of, like, for example, asking a question about, let's say, slavery, and saying that slavery was not a bad thing. It's just that it was a thing of the times. You see what I'm saying? Like, that could be something that is pulled out of a question because of the way the AI model has been trained. But I heard two things: that there's constant work being made to make sure that certain questions are being kind of like piped through a process of making sure that there are, and I'm sorry, I don't have all the technical language, but there's a process where things are vetted through the algorithm to say, hey, this is a question that needs to be answered this way. It has to be referred through this process versus that process. But one of the things, regardless of how the technology works, one of the things that I thought that is very interesting, and that we don't really talk about when we talk about AI, is the fact that just like when you go to a library and you're looking for source information, you have primary sources, secondary sources. You have to vet your information to make sure that it is correct. You don't open the first book and say, the book said. You say, I opened this book, I had these other resources, and I compared them, and there is a reference of some similarities through all these different texts that makes the answer more likely to be true or skewing that direction, versus an answer that when you look at other texts, they go against that answer. Like, just being able to do proper research is one of those things that doesn't go out the window if you're using, artificial intelligence. And that was something that I thought about, and it was also even mentioned. So that was actually good, because it created a conversation reminding people that it's not just about, the AI said this, and oh my God, it's evil because it said this. But it's also like saying, the author said this in this book, so this book must be evil. No. You say, well, that's the perspective of that particular author. How do we make sure, or how do we verify the information to make sure it's correct? One of the things I thought was really cool was the fact that, really cool, is the fact that the word cheating was brought up. And I was waiting to hear about that, because, from the advent of the use of AI, especially through tools like ChatGPT, it was like, oh my God, cheating. Everyone's going to cheat now. The kids are going to cheat. People are cheating. People are writing or asking AI to write their papers, and you're cheating. I think it's very funny because, again, something where we're running in fear rather than saying, If I get a paper, if I received a paper pre-AI, and I read this paper, and I know the student, and I have other students' work, and what I'm reading here in this paper and what the kids produced in the past are not quite aligned, or maybe this kid's paper sounds so much like this kid's paper. You know, there are. I think rather than saying people are cheating, it still requires that we do our jobs in vetting the tasks that we've assigned and getting them back and going through a process of, okay, now reading it, or even saying, hey, I'll use ChatGPT or an AI platform to now vet the outcome, the submitted work. Rather than saying they're cheating, we go through the rubric and we grade, and based on what we know of the student and the quality of work, we can make an assessment based on that. Or we can just say, hey, technology, I'm going to copy and paste or submit papers to you, and you tell me. Because most of the time these days we're emailing, we're submitting our assignments digitally, so it's not like we have to scan the paper into PDF files and do something with it. No, they're literally submitted to us in digital files. And you can copy your entire submissions and ask AI to now use the rubric that's been created to assess the paper, and also say, hey, are there any consistencies? Is there any evidence that this paper might have been completely generated through AI versus, using AI to make the paper better, grammar and style, but having the content be original to the author. So like things like that, I thought was very interesting. And I'm saying this, guys, we need to stop saying, oh, they're gonna cheat, oh, it's cheating. Because I'll tell you this, I remember very clearly when the whole idea of a calculator in a math classroom was considered cheating. Now, calculators are, for the most part, required in most high schools, or at least high school level work. When you get your supply list for high school, a calculator is in there, and by the time you get to the upper math levels, you need a graphic calculator. Which once upon a time that wasn't the case. You had to do the math. And now you use calculators to help you do the math quicker, faster, more accurately. So it's something to remember when we talk about AI, this whole notion of cheating and, oh my God, they're cheating. Let me see here. Some of the other things that I thought was really cool was that, but the only thing about this I think could have been done better is asking the question of the audience there, how are you using ChatGPT, if you're using it at all? That was something I would have been more curious about, because a lot of people are talking about ChatGPT and Perplexity and all these other platforms, Genesis, and they're demonizing it, but a lot of people are using it, but they're too afraid to say that they are using it. But then there are people out there who will tell you straight up, I don't use it ever. I don't know how to use it. And they'll say I need to use it more. So that's the question I would have loved to delve deeper into. If you're using it, why are you using it? How do you feel about using it? Is it something that you rather keep a secret, and why? There's been a lot of demonizing of technology to the point where it's like, if you're using this, then you do something wrong. And I'll tell you this, I remember very clearly when we were told that using the internet to do our papers was not good research, that you had to go to the library, go into the stacks and pull out books. And I remember that. I remember doing papers in college and having stacks of books that I had to sit down near and spend all night highlighting and referencing. And am I using APA? Am I using MLA? Formatting and all these different things. And now the books are literally on our iPads and our computers. The articles are right there digitally. And if you want to write a citation, MLA or APA style, you go into a website, to a MLA or APA generator, and you put the title of the book and all the information, and he spits it out for you. You copy and paste it onto your paper. And if anything, the university are telling you, here are generators you can use to create, So I think it's very interesting that that we're not talking about how it's being used, or better yet, assessing how often it's being used. Because I think we need to normalize the use of AI in our personal lives, in our daily work, because again, this is here. We can't ignore it. Just like we couldn't. I mean, listen. I remember coming to the New York City Department of Education early on, and the internet was something that was either blocked in school buildings or it was severely hampered to the point where if you weren't on a landline connected a machine directly connected to the network, you didn't have full access to the internet. You just had this thing which caused kids to find proxies and all these other things, which I think is amazing, because in inner city schools and spaces where it's expected our kids do not function at a higher level, they were the ones finding ways around it, finding proxies, being able to get to websites and everything right in the schools. And we're talking about kids who, a lot of them, honestly, if we're talking about it functionally, were not the most, I don't want to say they were illiterate, but we had kids who were low performers literacy-wise, but they were still able to find these proxies and these codes and be able to get around websites. I always thought it was amazing. But yeah, the whole notion of who we're using it, who's using it, and how we're using it. And the other thing too is, there was one of the presenters who kept on saying, it's very important that we're using it every single day. We're not just using it, but using it in a way that allows us to give back time to our students, which I think is very important. Listen, I am that guy telling people, listen, staff, whoever, how are you using this? Use it. But then make sure you do your due diligence and vetting the information that you're putting together, whether it's in your lesson plan, unit plans, and making sure it's aligned. Learn how to be better at prompting your AI, a platform that you're using, so you get the outcomes you're looking for. Also check your work. Don't be like, well, it used to take me 3 hours to write my lessons, and now you're like, oh, it only takes me 5 minutes. It shouldn't take you 5 minutes. It should take you about half an hour, if not an hour, because you're gonna ask AI to produce content for you based on particular expectations that you have and standards that you're looking for, that you're using. Then once it produces you that lesson plan, you're gonna take a pencil or pen or highlight and go through it and make sure that everything on there is up to par with what you want to teach in your classroom. So a 3-hour plus process might only be 45 minutes, or maybe a little bit longer if you have to go back and say, hey, fix these parts, and only that, it should be less stressful versus, having to sit down there and kind of rack your brain and do research and have all these books and figure out like, how am I going to teach this lesson, And then if you're doing stuff like that, creating tasks that allow for more time for you to be able to engage students who need that further support. This is why technology is important, and how we use it can actually improve how our kids perform in the classroom and how we perform as educators. There was a quote that was shared that by Dr. Randy Williams, PhD graduate from MIT. I thought this was pretty cool. She said, there is no algorithm. So here I am trying to pronounce a word. Listen, guys, don't forget I'm Nigerian, so I struggle. Algorithmic. There is no algorithmic justice without educational justice. Algorithmic. There are certain words that my tongue and my brain don't mesh well, because yes, no matter how well I speak English right now, I am Igbo, I am Nigerian, and my brain is telling me that word is too complicated for me to roll off my tongue. But now I know it's algorithmic. So yes, there is no algorithmic justice without educational justice. And that had to do with the fact that like any tool that's created, usually it's created by Westerners with a westernized perspective, and usually these people who are not of the Western echelon of European understanding and educated. So what ends up happening is perspectives have a Western European tinge to it. So what ends up happening is those who are not tend to get a product that doesn't speak to them. So it's funny that, at one point in time, you know, segregation or desegregation was the justice that that validated educational justice. But now making sure the algorithm itself speaks to all people, equally, that's the new battle we're having now. And it was something to definitely think about. I'm trying to see if there's anything here that stood out to me. AI as a superpower for formative assessments. And I think this is very important because I've seen people use AI to build out this summative assessments. So at the end of the lesson, at the end of the unit, that test that says that the kids learn what you want them to learn. But there was one of the panelists, and I'm trying to see if I remember who that was. It might have been Dr. Andre Weaver from Digital Promised. I believe it was him. And he said that that AI is a superpower for formative assessments, and those are the assessments you're doing while you're teaching. Just checking for understanding. There's moments where you're saying, what is the progress of your learning as you go through a lesson or a unit of instruction? So I think that's very important, because one of the things I always ask teachers when I look at their lesson plans is, what questions do you have for yourself to be checking on students as you're going through a lesson? At what point in time you ask those questions to assess progress? And formative assessments could be very hard because you're building out the best possible checks for the whole entire class individually to make sure that everyone's getting it. But you can ask AI to help you with that. What are the best moments in this lesson? You can take the whole entire lesson, throw it in there and say, assess the following lesson plan and build out formative assessments throughout the lesson to check for understanding. And it'll give you questions or tasks, and you can tell it what is the parameters of it. Is it a quick task? Is it a question that will show whether or not a single child or the whole entire class understands what the understands enough on learning the content? So that was something that I thought that was something to definitely keep in mind and implement. It was said the purpose of assessments is not about the results, but how you improve from it. Another thing I thought was incredible, because again, you have assessments, you have those responses, but what do you do with it? Often we get test scores or whatever back and we don't know what to do with it. But imagine being able to ask AI, listen, here are the test scores from this test. These are the number of students who passed. These are the questions they got right or wrong. And ask them, so now what should be the next step in the process of making sure we catch up all the kids? Something before that would require us to sit down and now rack our brains and try to figure out. You can ask it and it will give us an answer or two, and then we can assess how to best implement it. There's a lot of heavy lifting that we do as educators that often we don't realize that the achievement gap is because of our inability to meet the needs of every single child at once. But if we're able to give ourselves enough breathing room to support every child, which means on one end, we're doing less of that heavy lifting and just making sure that we're vetting the work to make sure that we're able to support our students to the best of our abilities. I mean, that is the work. And one of the things I would say at the end that I thought that stayed with me the most was a former superintendent and former principal, Musa Sharma, said, put it in the students' hands today. Put it in the students' hands today. And I have to agree with that. We have to find ways to get these technologies in our students' hands in a responsible fashion, but not to the point where we're so afraid that we're saying, oh no, not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet. Because as we're waiting in the inner cities and in our communities, and we're saying not yet because we're trying to find all the safeguards in place. This was happening. There are kids across town in other counties, other states, in more affluent communities where the kids are now going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ahead of us. And all of a sudden they move into careers because they're so comfortable with it, and because we were so afraid, and we kept on telling ourselves, not yet, not yet. And we don't want to do that, and I really believe we don't want to do that, because at the end of the day, our kids are already using it. They are. So just because we're afraid, just because we don't understand, doesn't mean that we can't hold hands with them and go through the process together. Yes, there are safeguards and digital citizenship curriculum out there that we can implement and help the kids understand how you function responsibly in this digital space. But we can't wait. We can't say they're not ready yet, because this is not just a sprint, it's a marathon, a very fast-moving marathon. And if we don't jump into the race, then we have no chance of finishing. And it's no longer about who gets there first. It's just a question of who finishes. And the more and more of our kids who finish, the more we're giving ourselves a chance to not just survive, but conquer. Again, I want to thank New York City Department of Education. I want to thank my superintendent for allowing me to be present for today's event. And I also want to thank Chancellor Banks for having the foresight to say, hey, this is important and we need to talk about this. Yeah. All right, y'all. Uche Njoku, Sneaker Principal. If any of this resonated with you, please share in the comments. Let me know what you think. Is AI a thing in your school district, in your community? It doesn't. You don't have to be a parent. An educator to answer this. You could be a parent or even a student. How are you using AI in your school, in your classroom, at home? And what do you think about where this is all going? I think, listen, I think it's already late. We should already be on this journey of technology and figuring out how to better utilize it in our educational system. But that's just me. Yeah. All right. Uche Njoku, Sneaker Principal. Till next time.